Welcome, everybody, to this special webinar. I particularly appreciate all the people who came in early. Sometimes I think if I started the webinar half an hour early, there would be 10 people here. So anyway, welcome, everybody. And this is a special webinar. And it's just one of these things that's sort of been gnawing at me for a long time. And those of you who take my classes know one of my pet peeves, or several of my pet peeves, are represented on the screen right here: KPIs, SLAs, but also we have this tendency as human beings to want to measure absolutely everything. And so, some of that's normal and natural, but sometimes we measure a bunch of stuff that we don't need to measure, and it can take up a lot of your extra time. There's also, and I think you all know this, right? The man in the moon. What does that tell us? Human beings see patterns everywhere all the time, which may or may not be real. And so this topic could be literally a 10-hour seminar because there's a lot of stuff we're not going to cover. In particular, I'm not going to cover tons and tons and tons of bad examples, but we're also not going to cover all the details about the standard things that you see and the exceptions to the rule. And too often when we measure things, we are basing things on the exception to the rule, and that's a problem. So with that, let me give a quick intro for those of you who are not familiar with me, not familiar with Small Biz Thoughts. I built and sold a few managed service businesses. I've bought a few, and I've sold a few. And I started out in bigger, much, much bigger business, working for Nationwide and one international corporation. So I've been involved with IT at literally every level. And so, early on, I was lucky to have learned some lessons from how things are done at big businesses. And it helped me to bring a certain level of professionalism into smaller businesses. And I write books about all of my adventures, and I encourage you to buy them all if you haven't already. And if you're a member of the Small Biz Thoughts technology community, then you would have access to all of those. I'm going to take questions in the Q&A panel. So if you put a question in the chat, I'm probably not going to see it until super late in the process. Chat is for you to make fun of me and to talk amongst yourselves. Questions should be in the Q&A panel, and I will try to hold questions till the end. I do expect this to be a full, long webinar. There is a handout if you go to mspwebinar.com/measuring-success. Scroll all the way to the bottom. There's a PDF. It's a 2-page. You can print back to back. And I would encourage you to do that so that you can take notes or open up Notepad or get a pencil and paper, whatever. I encourage you to take notes because there's some things here where I really want you to think about how you can apply this in the so-called real world. The recording will be at mspwebinar.com, and that's the place where I have some other free webinars for you. Several of them have handouts. The sample security training is actually an entire presentation of a security training that you could give to your clients. And I start out talking to you as an IT professional. Then I give the training as if there's a client in the room. And then I talk about how you might use that, so forth. It includes the entire PowerPoint presentation where you can take off my logo, put on yours, take out my example, put in something from the news in the last 6 months, so forth. But that's the kind of thing that I like to do, is to be constantly giving you resources you can actually use today to improve your business. Today, we are going to go 60 to 90 minutes. So the meat is going to be in the 60 minutes. Q&A will be after that. And we're going to talk about measuring things and kind of the problems with measuring stuff. We're going to talk a little bit about what matters. We're actually a lot about what matters and what doesn't. And in particular, what causes bad KPIs. And I believe, just sort of watching a few articles in magazines and websites and seeing a few products here and there, I believe this is the next big opportunity for members to find somebody trying to sell them something and get some of your money, and telling you, oh, you have to have this KPI tool. But I just want to make sure that you go into it with your education in place so that you know what matters and what doesn't matter to you and to your business and to where you are today and to where you expect to be in the next 5 years. Because there's no point in measuring something that will have no effect on your business, and certainly nothing that would have no positive effect on your business. We're going to talk about a systems approach to management, which means, to me, a big holistic approach. We're going to talk about how your personal goals and your company goals are related to each other, and creating some measures that actually matter in your business. And then we'll have the open Q&A. Now, I get a little preachy in the middle. If you've seen my webinars before, you're used to that. So it's all good. But I am going to talk a lot about meaningless numbers, but I'm not going to leave you hanging. I will give you things that I think matter, and a specific example that most of you are not doing that will have a dramatic positive effect on your business if you do it. And I'm sad to say, you already know what it is, and you've decided not to do it. And I just want to encourage you to go ahead and do it. I also encourage you, turn off that second monitor, let it go to a screensaver, and pay attention if you can. I don't want to take 9 questions of the same question from people who were not actually listening. I also will not have, sorry to my friends at Staples, I will not have an easy button, and I'm not going to give you, these are the 3 numbers you need. What I will give you at the end is one easy number that will actually be quite accessible to you and is the most important number in your business, followed by 2 related numbers, they're related to each other, that tell you more about your business than almost anything. And then finally, one really hard to quantify measure that is going to be unique to you, but also critically important to your long-term success. And, the bottom line is, you shouldn't expect an easy button. You should never expect an easy button. One of my favorite quotes from Thomas Edison is that opportunity is missed by most people because it's dressed in overalls and it looks like work, right? So, you're all here. You're all business owners for the most part. Maybe there's some managers on here, but you are all here because you want to do something that will improve your business, right? So let's see if we can get that done. Now, who do I serve? This is important to me, and I think it's important to you to know who you serve. I serve the SMB market. I serve small businesses, and I'm going to give you some truths as I know them based on my experience. I mentioned that I have owned these different businesses, but I've also been a manager before that at several businesses, and I've been a coach. And so I have a variety of experiences, and I could be like you. I could be working pretty much in any industry I wanted, at any level I wanted. And I've chosen to do what I do because the SMB market is important to me. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but basically, the small market is not that small. If you have 50 or under employees, that's about 98% of the businesses in the United States. And the United States has more big businesses than most countries. So If you're in another country, it's probably more than 98%. If you are 5 million and under, that's about 98% of all the businesses in the United States. And how you manage $100 million company is different than how you manage a smaller company. It's just the nature of the beast. That's the way the world works. One of the important things you have to remember is that at big businesses, there's a lot of mystery. And in your business, there's not much mystery at all. And here's what I mean by that. When I went to work for a mid-market company, and I say mid-market, they had 20 major companies across the United States in many, many states. And there was one corporate headquarters, and I ran one division, one corporation that had offices in 2 states when I got there and 3 states when I left. And we had created an outsourced licensing product that was sold to a 4th state. And when I got there, I didn't know who was politically powerful. I didn't know my employees. I didn't know the software that was being run. I didn't know how many operating systems. This was back in the day when there were lots of different operating systems. So I didn't know how many operating systems we had. I didn't know how data was moved. I didn't know which layers reported to me. There were about 50 people in my office. 30 of them reported to me, but I didn't know if there was a hierarchy within those people. I didn't know who was the best and who was the worst. I didn't know that I would be firing one of the central people in that culture within the first 6 months. I didn't know that I was going to have to meet some very, very big challenges in my first year. I did know 20% of my pay was based on performance for a system I didn't know. I didn't understand. I was hired to be a manager, right? And I walked into a system where there was lots and lots of mystery. And then I left there and I went to an even bigger corporation that is, at the time, 99,000 employees. They're more now. Referred to themselves as a Fortune 10 corporation with good cause. I was in charge of a division of about 25 direct reports that did desktop support, and another group that did Unix support. That was a much smaller group, and a much smaller group that did backups for our office, which was about 7,000 desktops. Again, when I walked in there, I didn't know the hierarchy. I didn't know who liked who. I didn't know the politics of the situation. I didn't know how performance was evaluated. I didn't know what ticketing system they used. I didn't know almost anything I needed to know. And the reason I go into this is that if you've ever worked in a company that's not SMB, you've probably had a similar experience. Management training is based on that environment. Management training. When you read a book on management, it is written by and for someone who works in a big business with lots of mystery, lots of unknown. And so when you're hired into that, they need you to be as successful as possible. How do they move you from not knowing to knowing? And that's where KPIs come in. They say, these are the standards. This is what the industry looks like. This is how you motivate employees. You're never going to know on day one which employee shows up late every day. That's going to take some time. You're not going to know on day one which employee always does a little extra work, studies on the weekend, gets certifications that are not required. You're never going to know those things on day one. You have to find them out. So management training is frequently based on saying, okay, I'm walking into a situation with a lot of mystery. How do I find out about my own organization? But in SMB, you don't have that mystery. You know which technicians are lazy and which are not. You know who's working extra time to get certifications. You know which clients love you and which clients never take your advice, right? You don't have a lot of mystery inside your business. And my advice to everybody on this call is that you should do everything you can to thrive where you are and where you expect to be in the next few years. And people always say, well, act like the company you want to be. Well, I don't know about that. When you get to the point when you're approaching 50, 75, 100 employees, when you think it's possible that you will suddenly move to 250 employees, by all means, you should start planning for that and educating yourself for that right before it gets there. But if that's not going to happen in the next 5 years, put all of your attention into living and thriving in the world that you're in right now. I'm not saying that you won't grow. It's great to grow from 1 million to 2. It's great to go from 2 to 5. But if where you are today is 10, 15, 20% of where you're going to be at the end of the year, then do everything you can to thrive and be successful where you are, and then build a nice solid base. And if you choose to go to the next level, you can. Now, we're going to come back to this, but you've got a system, and the system operates as a whole, whether you like it or not. That, like, you may not have defined it, you may not have quantified it, but you have a system. And to me, I love the idea of the exploded view of the engine, right? There's all of these parts inside of an engine, a Volkswagen engine or any other engine, and that makes up the system, right? And so you need to learn how to manage your business as a system. And so it's often the case that we improve one thing at a time, but you can't improve one thing at a time without regard to the bigger picture, right? If you're going to put on better performance tires, that's great. Make sure that you have the right rims. Make sure that you have the everything you need to make sure that you're not creating something that's a little too dangerous or a little more than what you need. Also, don't waste a lot of money just because you're going to get an extra 0.00001%, right? Manage the system and you have, and build the system that you want. Complete absolute side note, I put this slide in my State of the Nation address. Somebody took a screenshot of it, and I can tell by the way I cleaned up the inside of the Dream and the outside of the bed, so those two off-white areas, I could tell that they took a screenshot and reposted it on Facebook without giving attribute to the actual author. So I was a little irritated by that. All right, end of that. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to dive into KPIs and why you might be measuring the wrong things. So we're going to go zoom into KPIs, and then we're going to zoom out and look at your business holistically and how you can build measures that actually matter. And in preparation for that holistic view, please go grab the handout that is on our website. So go to mspwebinar.com, go into the measuring success, scroll down, get that PDF. Thank you very much. Now, it's important. It's not difficult. It's just important. So it's also important that you look at your why. Why does your business exist? And I will say, if you don't know the answer to this off the top of your head, I'm not going to make you feel guilty. I have done coaching now, I would say, with 24 clients that did not know why their business existed. Of course, they did know, they just hadn't articulated it. They hadn't put it into specific words, they hadn't shared it with their employees. I also don't want you to think that you have to go through some $15,000 weekend retreat in order to figure out what your business is about. In your gut, if you own a small business, you know why it exists. I would like you to articulate it. I would like you to write down why you think your business exists. And it doesn't have to be highfalutin and it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be really, really simple. Many of you have heard me say the words, that a small business exists to fulfill the goals and desires of the owners, right? So your business exists for a very specific reason. And it might be as simple as, I need to make money. I got to pay some bills and I got to put shoes on the baby. And I could use a little bit of retirement. Okay, that's all good. There's nothing wrong with that. That's why your business exists. Now, second question is, how do you want to run it? Well, I like running a business that I think is friendly, that people enjoy working with, where people send me notes and say, hey, I saw this and that and that. How's the baby doing? Blah, blah, blah. Right? I want a nice, friendly business. I want to live in the world of my business and my life being interconnected with each other and being successful, right? So there's nothing wrong with that. You do not need a mission statement. In fact, I've done coaching with companies that are 20 and $50 million, that when I ask them for their mission statement, that's part of my onboarding process, right? Send me your mission statement. More often than not, they say, I think Bob's got a copy of that. Let me talk to Noreen, because I think she might have that somewhere in her files. We went through a process to do that, like it's around here somewhere. So a formal mission process, more often than not, is something that people go through and then they check the box and they're done and they feel better about themselves and it's all good. I don't want that for you. I want every single member of your company to know why your company exists and know what your values are, so that they can also choose to live in a similar environment, choose to be part of your company, and choose to make you as successful as possible. I do believe that demotivating employees is the greatest management achievement of the last 100 years, right? And we've all worked. Many of you are here as IT consultants because you had a horrible, horrible boss and you decided, oh my God, first of all, A, I hate my boss, and B, I could do a better job, and C, I never want to work in an environment like this again. So you became an independent consultant. When we go to look at management, I love W. Edwards Deming. You should read everything he's ever done. But the greatest message he has is that 90% of how we manage people has to do with the system, not with their specific job, right? So if you think about it, and we're going to get into some of the details, employees don't control very much, right? But we talk about controlling our systems as if it's this thing that can be microscopically controlled, right? We control almost nothing, but we pretend that we need a magnifying glass in order to move the controls and be as fine-tuned as possible. And that's just not the case. When we use the term KPIs, key performance indicators, almost everything that we call KPIs are not key and they don't measure performance. And I'm going to suggest some things that matter. But if this doesn't work, then what does? KPIs or any measure is generally divided into leading and lagging. And there's not very many leading indicators. So if you're in sales, that's probably the best example. In sales, you've all heard this. You send out 1,000 letters. You're hoping to get 5 responses. Of those, you're hoping to get 4 meetings. With luck, if you know what you're doing, those 4 meetings will turn into 4 proposals. 2 of those will get accepted, and then you'll sign a contract, right? Your numbers may vary. Your numbers will vary. But anyway, the point is, once you have that as a system, if you do it one time, if you send out 1,000 letters and you do no follow-up, you have no system, and it doesn't matter. The next 1,000 you send out will be meaningless and isolated, and they will have no connection to your previous behavior. But if you have a system, if you constantly send out 1,000, send out 1,000, send out 1,000, do the follow-up, do the follow-up, do the follow-up, you will be able to eventually say, when I send out 1,000 letters, I get 1 client. When I send out 1,000 letters, I get $5,000 in additional monthly recurring revenue, right? Whatever it might be, your system, once it's regular and productive, will become a good predictor of what the outcome will be. Almost nothing in your business is a leading indicator. So most of what we do is lagging. How did we do last quarter? All right, well, the quarter's up, right? And so it's almost 2 weeks old. So we're into the new quarter. Have you run your reports? Do you know what you did? Did you do more or less than you expected? Did you meet your goals? Which technicians performed the best? Which clients were the biggest pain in the neck? Right? Those lagging indicators tell you where you've been, but you can't change it. You can't change the ticket behavior after the ticket is closed. What your technicians did is what they did. And so you have to know that, right? So be careful with lagging indicators because you can't change the past, and it's the thing we measure the most. Now, when you hear the term industry standard, right, what does that mean exactly, right? Well, one way to look at it is it's what somebody was able to present in a keynote speech in front of 130 people who didn't even pay to get in the room. Okay, well, there you go. That's one industry standard. Another way is to say, well, it's what most people in the industry are doing. Well, what most people in the industry are doing is an average of some kind, whether it's a mean, median, or mode. I won't go into the math. We normally think of it as the mean, but these numbers tend to go up together, mean, median, and mode. And so for about half the people in the audience, the best practice would be to lower their performance. Nobody calls a best practice the top 10%, right? Maybe that's where you should be, maybe, but do you run the company that can get that 10%? I've many, many times talked about how every single rule, every measure is interrelated to each other. And so all the things you do, all your personal best practices, all your SOPs create your company. And so it's really hard to take that and put it on top of somebody else's company and say, okay, now you go do that. Right? So we need to educate ourselves. We need to know what these things are. But again, you're running your company. We do have a lot of stats that are completely meaningless, I was at Channel Partners earlier this year and did a little thing with the coaches, coffee coaching thing. And one of the people who came to my table said, I'm trying to figure out what to measure. He said, I currently measure the number of tickets closed. And I know it's a horrible, horrible thing to measure, but it's the only thing we measure. And I'm like, wow, Well, this is your lucky day. Give me a login to your system. I will close all of your tickets and you will be perfectly successful in the next 15 minutes. Right? If that's your measure of success, boom, that's easy. Right? But that's a perfect example of we know we're doing the wrong thing. Right? When you say, okay, endpoints per technician. Well, yeah, tell me a story of how that relates to your success. If I wanted to value your company and I wanted to gobble up just another vendor, well, then endpoints per technician might be something that I would care about. If I'm running a managed service business, I was one of the people who early on, like 2008, 2007, Mike and I determined that we could manage between 500 and 1,000 endpoints per technician. In our company, with what we were doing, with the practices we had, with the software we had, da 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 da. I have good friends who say that is 100% bullshit and that nobody can give quality, white glove, good service without, if they exceed more than 100 or maybe 150 endpoints per technician. And they are super successful and very profitable. And, that the specific company I have in mind, the owner lives a very nice life in a very nice house and drives a very nice car and doesn't need somebody to come in and tell them that they need 1,000 endpoints per technician, right? What makes sense in your business? What does your system produce, and how can your system manage the right number of endpoints? And don't worry about what somebody else thinks. If you're not selling your business today, then don't spend a whole lot of time worrying about metrics that don't affect your business positively and don't affect your sales price today. We also have all kinds of vanity metrics, and you know this. Revenue is the biggie. Revenue is, oh, I got a $2 million company. Well, good for you. Are you making any profit? Oh, well, last year I took home a salary of 60,000 to minimize taxes, and then the company made another 20. Like, okay, I highly recommend that you go get a job. There's nobody who's earning less than that out in the open market. So unless you just want to run this business as a hobby, go get a job. And it doesn't matter what your revenue is. I have coached many, many companies that are over 5 million and have no profit, absolutely no profit. They are living on cash flow. At the other hand, right now, Lori Hartke is finishing a class over at IT Service Provider University about how to earn a six-figure salary when you have no employees and you're making a few $100,000 top line revenue. My brother Arlen used to say, it's not how much you make, it's what you don't spend that matters. In other words, profit is the thing that matters, right? So we have these vanity metrics that we'd like to talk about. The worst case scenario is that you go to a seminar and somebody stands up on stage and they convince you that a specific number matters. And then you get home and you go, oh, this is the most important number, mean time to close. Yeah, we're going to focus all of our attention on that. And a week later, when somebody says, why? Why does that matter? Why are we measuring this? Why are we putting energy into this? Why are we changing our standard operating procedures in search of this metric? And you can't explain it. That's the worst case scenario, is that you have lost the why you are doing something or measuring something. If you cannot explain how a statistic affects the success of your company, and success might mean culture, happiness, depression, profit. It might mean all kinds of things. You as a human being in a small company work with a small group of people. You work with humans as employees and humans as clients, and all of it together is affected by your behavior. So don't measure something if you don't know why you can draw a line between that number and the goals of your company. There's a lot of stuff that we talked about before that's visible versus invisible. Well, numbers, the stats, your close rate, your employee utilization will not tell you about the stress level in your company or the happiness of your spouse or whether you're closer to retirement than you were 3 months ago or whether you're ready for the next round of technology upgrades or whether you are burned out on this industry altogether, right? And in particular, it won't tell you whether your clients or your employees are happy and want to continue in the business that you're in. So the most obvious things in your company are visible. If it is knowable and it is important in your company, you probably know it. Okay. So don't look for mystery that may not be there. Again, if you're running a division with 50 people in a corporation with 100,000 employees, by all means, there's all kinds of mystery. If you're running a corporation with 6 employees and 50 clients, there's not a lot of mystery. So what matters? Obviously, profit. At the end of the day, this is it. You need to be able to have enough profit to reach your goals. And so, how are you going to measure that? Well, luckily, that's the easiest thing in the world to measure. And if you don't even know how to do that, that's cool. The federal government has helped you out by doing a thing called a tax return. It will tell you what your profit is, assuming that you filled it out honestly. So I want you to think about where you want to be in 5 years. And I want you to write this out. And again, if you're not ready to do it at this minute, that's okay. But do take the time. And it'll probably be along the lines of, in 5 years, my business is going to continue to provide me and my employees a regular income stream, and it's going to continue to grow profit at, let's say, 10% a year. In the meantime, it will be a pleasant and productive place to work and a positive professional atmosphere. Okay? Think about what honest to goodness deep in your heart matters to you and write that down, because you can achieve it if you put your mind to it. And I will tell you, there's 70 some people here. No one is going to write down, we will be closing 74% of our tickets within 3 business days. No, that's not your 5-year vision for what matters in your company and your life and what's going to constitute success for you. No one is going to say, my vision is that we'll have an extra $5,000 per technician. No, that's not what the actual quantitative view of your success is going to look like. I would also note, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but employees and managers absolutely have a right to take pride in their work. And more often than not, what we measure as so-called KPIs separates them from the pride in their work. And you know this, every time you call Xfinity or any cable company, anytime you call an airline, these people are not happy in their work. I had a lunch with a good friend of mine a few weeks ago, and he gave me such a perfect example. So in the pandemic, nationwide company, many offices all over the place. Every office has got 10, 15 people, right? Nationwide organization. In the pandemic, they send everybody home. And then when they could, they let their leases expire so that they didn't have to pay rent. And then when it looked like the pandemic was going to be over, they leased new office space. They set it up with all co-working spaces, right? So it's kind of like, having your office be on a picnic table with 6 other people. And then they wanted everybody to get back to the office. And so they told them, we know your IP address at home and we know your IP address in the office. So twice a day, at random days at 9 o'clock and 3 p.m., we're just going to check and see how everybody's doing and where they're working. And you should either be at the office or at your home office, and we will know that. Great. Then they said, we want everybody to be back in the office 3 days a week, and we're going to move this to 4 days a week. Great. So what happens? People go to the office. When do they leave? When do they leave the office? Well, there's a mass departure every day at 3:15 because if they've been pinged and if they've been allocated their time and space, well, then they're done. And they're a little irritated, pissed off that they have to go to the office. They're unhappy. They're less productive, blah, 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 blah. You have turned a measure into a target, right? You have said, we're going to measure this, and we don't care what this does to the morale of our employees because we have a goal company-wide, and that's what we're going to do. And that is such a great example of malicious compliance. We will do what we've been asked to do, but we won't like it, and we'll make sure everybody knows we don't like it. If you haven't read Drive by Daniel Pink, this weekend is a great time to read that book. What actually motivates people is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And what that means is that you give your technicians autonomy. You hire good people. You say, here are the guidelines. Here are our SOPs. This is how we represent ourselves to our employees. This is how we get work done. Now go do it. If you side check them, if you check on every job they do, you have diminished their autonomy, right? I had a video out a few months ago about how when there's shared responsibility, no one is responsible, right? Like if you say, okay, you go do this install and I'm going to come behind you and I'm going to check your work and I'm going to verify that it got done on every single desktop. Well, okay, why don't you just do it yourself? That's what the employee is thinking, but the employee is also thinking, this is awesome. I don't have to be good. I don't have to do it right the first time. Why? Because my boss is going to check up on me. My boss he's got my back, right? He's my friend. He loves me. He's going to make sure I don't screw this up. So I don't have to do a good job. The result is you have lowered the quality of the support that's being given because that person is not responsible for their own job. That's your fault. Not you personally, obviously, but so be careful about that. Remember, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. People want to have meaning in their jobs. They want to be good. And if they're not good, give them training. Make them good. Make them the kind of employees you want. And that will be good for everybody in the company. Part of where all of this comes from is the division of decisions. And this is something that happens a lot. Mystery enters into larger businesses because one decision is made in a different time and space from another, right? The whole going back to work after the pandemic, we're seeing this time and time again. There are people who made the decision to sell their office building, and now they don't have an office, and they've decided that they don't trust their employees, and everybody's got to be back in the office. Okay, right? But we also have some of this division of decisions in our own companies. You know, you've seen there's 100 stories of how we do this. Why do we do this? We do this because we've always done this. Well, never a good answer, right? Why is that? Well, once we've lost the why, once we no longer know why we're behaving the way we behave, then we need to question whether or not that's still worth doing, right? One time I installed this incredible over $20,000 fax system into a company so that all of the faxes would show up in everybody's email instead of in one location where they had to be separated by somebody in their front office. But there wasn't buy-in from the top. And what happened was everybody got these emails. forwarded them to the person in the front office who now printed them on her printer and then distributed them to each of the employees. It's like, right? Part of what you do in your job is not just to provide a great future looking solution, but it is to train people on changing the way they do things. And you need to be able to do this inside your own business as well as in your clients. If you have to pick one thing that you're going to do today, besides download that handout, it is to go to sketchplanations.com and find this graphic and print it out and post it on your wall. The biggest mistake we ever make when we measure things is that we turn them into targets for behavior. And you all, again, you know this. You've been on tech support when you open a ticket and they say, okay, yep. I took a look at this. Here's 3 articles you should read. I'm going to close this ticket. If you have any more problems, you let me know. Boom. Man, their close rate on that ticket was super, super fast. That's good for their stats, right? Is it good for customer service? Is it good for the long-term benefit of that company or your company? No, right? When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. This is one of the great truths in business that not enough people pay attention to. Be careful what you measure and make sure it matters. We unintentionally move behavior by the measures that we put out there. And if you haven't seen all of the news stories about Wells Fargo in the last couple of years, they go through this like every 6 to 18 months, there's a new scandal, but they're all basically along the same lines. Somebody decided that an industry standard was, hey, how do we know we're doing well? Well, we know we're doing well when one of our clients has a number of our products. So if they open a bank account, we want to make sure that they get a savings account as well as checking. We want to offer them a home loan. We want to offer them a car loan. They got to have a credit card. They probably need a line of business credit, right? All of these products, we want them a CD. We want a retirement account, right? All of these things, we need to add them up. So you, the employees, will be incentivized to open these accounts and offer this cross-selling. Nobody, as far as we know, was specifically told to open accounts that were not authorized, but that was the result of measuring that behavior, right? As soon as you say that's a target, we need more accounts per customer. Well, guess what? They got that, and they got a lot more along with it, including some people actually were convicted in court of criminal offenses and went to jail. So be careful about that. It happens in our business as well. You always have more focus and more clarity on what the mission of your company is than your clients or your employees, right? What's visible to you is not necessarily visible to all of your employees. And so you have to have the goal of making your company goals known. Where are we going to be? What are we going to do with AI? And if you don't know, that's cool, but openly have that discussion. Okay, we don't have a clear AI policy today. We need to get one by the end of the year, right? We should have some written goals, but there's also all the stuff that is not visible to you, all those things that I talked about earlier. When employees don't have information, they fill in the gaps. And this isn't an employee thing. This is a human thing. When you don't have information, you fill in the gaps, right? So what are the goals of the service manager? Like, is the service manager here for about 3 more years and then he's going to retire and buy himself an island, or go live in an RV, or what are the personal goals, right? All of that kind of stuff. There's a lot of invisible stuff in your business that is important. And again, you don't have a lot of mystery in your business, but there's always some, right? So how do we put these things together in a way that's actually meaningful and useful and doesn't demoralize your employees? If you haven't read The Absolutely Unbreakable Rules of Service Delivery, this weekend is a good time to start that book as well. One of the big rules is you cannot control people, but you can control your process, right? So you can't control clients who just insist on using crappy passwords. You can't control employees, right? You can motivate them, you can do this, you can do that, but at the end of the day, you can't control people, but you can control your process. And that means you need to manage the process, manage the system, and then see if people are in line with it. So I actually have a slide dedicated to me taking a sip of coffee and reminding you to get that download. So when we talk about your business as a system, the probably the greatest example in any business, and it's certainly true in your business, is that if you say we have to go faster, we need an increased speed, whether that means we close more tickets in a day, we solve more problems, we talk to more clients, we make more sales calls, no matter what it is. When you increase speed, there are more mistakes, right? If you insist that people talk to a client, hit these 3 points and close that ticket, boom, 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 you will have more things that fall through the cracks. That is just the way the world works. If you have extra hours, if people work 12 hours instead of 10 hours, there will be more mistakes, right? I always love tax time. It's my opportunity to say, thank God the person who does my taxes does it between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. She never logs into the system and works on my taxes at 11 o'clock at night when she is burned out from everything else that's going on in her personal and professional life, right? I want somebody who does my taxes during the day, during normal business hours. And you want your clients to have the same view of you. You need to not burn out your technicians. You need to not burn out yourself, right? The other thing that happens when we overpromise, we make more mistakes, right? So you have to be careful that you make sure that you are managing the entire systems. If you're going to automate, make sure that you're careful about it. Go slow, be careful, make sure it fits into your long-term process, and let your employees give you feedback. Time and time again, my systems were improved because somebody came to me and said, hey, you know what we should do? When we close a ticket, let's put in this little note, and that's what it means internally. That's what it means to clients, and everybody knows it's up to spec, right? And if we have questions, we're going to put in this other note, right? I've got 300, 400 SOPs online. Go read them all. But the point is, a lot of those came from feedback from my employees who said, I know how to fix this system. And they wouldn't have given me that feedback if I was a jerk, right? They wouldn't have given me that feedback if they felt that they were not part of a team where it mattered. They want to be part of a system that is successful, and they want to know that they are contributing to that success. It's real important that you don't just bolt something onto your system without thinking about it. Consider your service board, right? You got a great service board, it works, and somebody comes along and says, hey, you know what you should do? You should buy this thing, bolt it onto your service board, and now you'll be able to do this or that, right? No matter what it is. If you bolt something on, you have to make sure it fits your vision. What does this do to help me reach my 5-year goal? Does it increase client happiness? Does it make the work go smoother? Does it make employees have a little less stress? Do employees love it, or do they resist it because it's just one more stupid thing that we have to do, right? You need to always be evaluating what you do based on whether or not it improves the product, and your product is service, right? So great service happens by design, not because you went to a show and you bought something, right? One of the sub conversations in our industry is, how many tools do I have that have overlapping functionality, or that now they're almost like streaming media subscriptions? I got a tool for this and a tool for that, and each one of them is only $1.50 a desktop, right? Times 100, right? And I'm getting paid $150 a desktop. So wait a minute. This might not be the most profitable decision. And I've clogged up my system with all this crap that doesn't necessarily have a direct connection to service. So if you have a system, you have to understand it. And then when you think about a measurement in a stable system, let's say that your service department is a stable system. It's like a closed engine, right? It's a stable system. It will produce what it will produce. And if you try to make it produce more, well, you're either going to stress the system, you're going to break something, which usually means somebody, or you need to improve the system so it will produce more. And you need to make that improvement. There's always a little instability when you make those changes, but then you'll have a new stable system that's improved that meets the new goals, right? If your system is not stable, it means that you produce a different thing every time. One customer is happy, one's not. One technician has a bad day 3 days out of the week. Your goal is to get them to have a bad day 2 days out of the week, and then 1 day, and then no days, right? If somebody gets a different experience every time they call your company, you have an unstable system. Okay. If you have an unstable system, the only goal you need is to create a stable system, right? If you've got a stable system, then you need to love it and nurture it and care for it. Increase it when you can. Buy a helpful product when it makes sense, and it will help you improve the stable system. But you got to focus on that stability. I would highly recommend, and you can take a screenshot if you want, don't look at what other people want your business to do. I've often said, when Microsoft was trying to sell BPAWS, which is now Office 365, I refused to sell any of that crap. I sold open licenses until I could figure out how to make money with it. This whole thing of you're going to get 18 cents a license, and if somebody designates you as the reseller for the next 20 years, you'll make as much as you would on an open license. Like, I'll stick with the open licenses, right? When I could make money with it, I made that change, right? But you can never let one of your suppliers decide what your business model is, right? A great example is accountants. Don't let your accountant decide what your business looks like. Your accountant wants you to have people owe you money. They want you to have 30 days outstanding invoices. Your AR to them is an asset on your books. They don't understand, like my theory is, get paid in advance for everything, right? Take that 30 days, put all that money in your bank account. It's also an asset. I'd rather have the asset be 100% of what's owed to me and it's in my bank account than to think like, if somebody owes me money and 30 becomes 60, becomes 90, and we start to have some financial troubles, maybe that outstanding amount is not what I need it to be, and it might not be 100 cents on the dollar, right? So be careful about when other people say you should be doing this, right? I can't tell you how many people have said, you need to go get yourself a mortgage so you'll have a deduction. Like, okay, but I pay extra money in the mortgage and I get a deduction off of a piece of that, and da-da-da-da-da. At the end of the day, I'm better off not having a mortgage, because then I'm less money out of pocket, right? If you focus on the deduction, that's one thing. If you focus on the big picture, it's another. So be careful about other people's advice in your business. Now, on this worksheet, which you should all have downloaded by now, I honestly want you to answer the question, why does your business exist? And again, it should be along those lines of, in 5 years, I want to continue to provide the income that I need and the income that my employees need, and I want to keep my clients happy, and I want to have a good culture, right? That's why my business exists. It's not super complicated. I don't have to spend a bunch of money on a mission, vision, values weekend. I think there's value in such a weekend. Don't get me wrong, but most of you, it's pretty clear why your company exists. You just need to write it down. The second thing that we're going to look at is backlog and utilization. And the third thing is what actually matters. So when you look at the vision, you look at where will your company be 5 years from now? What do you want it to be 5 years from now? That will give you a strong sense of what matters in your business. So I promised 3 measures, and here we are at the top of the hour. Number 1 is profit. And if you can't figure out your profit, please get on a Zoom call with me and we will figure it out. You should know absolutely and definitively what your profit is. And to me, profit means the amount of money you take out in salary or wages, plus any dividends, plus your profit at the end of the year. This is what you actually, honest to goodness, get to take home and pay taxes on. So that's a number that is knowable, it's easy to find, and it is the single most important number in your business. So if you haven't figured that out, stop here, save this video, come back another day, and you'll be able to move on from here. If you don't know your profit, you need to do whatever it takes to figure out your profit. One of the reasons I'm in this business and do what I do, and I've talked to a few people about this actually in the last month, is that I looked around about 20 years ago and I saw people who were in their 50s and 60s and had one eye on retirement and had no money in the bank and had only debt from their businesses. And that's not our entire industry, but it's a solid 20 or 25% of the people in this industry are charging $150 an hour and don't have money at the end of the year. That should not happen. Your profit should not be a negative number. It may be small, you may scrape the bottom, but it should never, ever, ever be negative. And quite realistically, it should be at least a decent wage. If you choose not to work for somebody else, great. I totally get that. I've been self-employed since 1995. I get working for yourself. But you should also make a decent living and you should lead the lifestyle you want. Ultimately, that's why small businesses exist. A big business exists to make money for the shareholders. Period. A small business exists to fulfill the dreams and desires of the owners. And if it's not doing that, profit is the key reason. So there's that. All right. Second, there's actually 2 numbers, backlog and utilization. And this is not an easy number that you can put up on your wall. Backlog is quite simply the total number of hours inside your ticketing system. What does that require? That requires that you put time estimates on every ticket. Yes, you have to do this, even if you're selling flat fee. And it's almost obvious to me why, but I will tell you why. What you buy in your business is time. What you sell in your business is time. The difference between what you buy and what you sell is the system you have that adds value to time A and turns it into time B. And even if you have a flat fee system, it is time that determines whether or not you get to keep 99% of that flat fee or 9% of that flat fee. And you do not know, you cannot know the answer to that if you do not track the time it takes to deliver service. So Backlog and utilization are the second most important numbers in your business because they tell you everything else about your business. They tell you whether or not you should be hiring or laying off a technician. Utilization is, the billability, right? It is, let's say that somebody is 60% billable. Great. If one technician is 60% billable, that means in a 40-hour week, there are 24 hours that are not sales. They are not driving around town. They are not cleaning up their desk. They are directly related to working tickets. Okay. And 60% is quite reasonable. If you have people who don't drive around the county, that's great, 70. If they sit in a cubicle in a dim environment with the lights off and the head down, they might be stressed out, but they also might get to 80%. At 80%, technicians begin to twitch and have nervous disorders, right? So you got to be careful. So you might have one technician who's at 80 and one that's at 70 and one's at 60, and your service manager is probably 35 or 40. And here's the thing. You got to know that you cannot, this is such a perfect example, you cannot judge them on their individual utilization. Why? Well, I just told you the service manager is at 40%. Why? Because the service manager has to evaluate time cards, manage whether or not somebody took a bath yesterday, do a little side training for somebody who's a new technician, organized, schedules for who's going to take over when, Jerry goes on vacation, right? They got management to do. They have things to do. They also have to do customer service, and they got to smooth out bills and blah, 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 right? They're just lucky if they can bill 16 hours a week. And that's legit. There's 100%, like they're doing their job, and 40% means nothing as an individual. Dude who's at 70% is working hard, very productive, getting things done, kicking butt, taking names, right? And I give you a great example about the difference in technicians. So many years ago, I'll never forget this. We had this big migration, and I don't know, it was like 40 desktops, and I've got 8 technicians. Okay. So I brought in somebody from another local IT company to help us out, and I engaged our sales manager. And I said, okay, you're going to help us out. And the sales manager was given the same checklist as everybody else. And we said, look, you're going to sit down, you're going to log in, you're going to do A, B, C, you're going to work through this checklist. If anything is not exactly and precisely as it says in this checklist, you're going to draw a red line, you're going to tape it to the monitor, and you're going to walk away. And either Mike or Karl is going to come in, and we're going to finish that job because it wasn't perfect, right? And so what happened was the sales manager migrated more machines than anybody else because he only worked on machines that were perfect and precisely up to date and exactly what was on the checklist. The average technician had fewer because they would get to something and something would pop up and it wasn't what was on the checklist, but they know what they're doing and they knew, oh, yeah. I just have to turn off that monitor and now we can do the update. And now we got the migration wizard working. Life is good, right? And then who did the fewest? Well, Mike and Karl, because we had the most troublesome machines, right? So the utilization rate as individuals, you're going to be able to explain it. And you might go to some technician and say, hey, let's work on improving this skill or that skill. And even if you post it up on the wall, I don't care. You can post utilization rates on the wall. Don't judge people by them. Don't let them compete on this, because once they start competing, they're going to start closing tickets. They're going to add extra time that wasn't really intended. They're going to do stuff that doesn't represent actual good service delivery. You need to look at utilization for your entire team, because once let's say you've got somebody at 80 and somebody at 70 and somebody at 60 and da-da-da-da-da. When you look at all of your team and say, we are 70% billable at the end of the day, that's freaking awesome. I have to say, that's a very, very high number. But if you were 70%, well, then now you can project a project and know that in order to be able to produce that project, you're just going to calculate out, okay, and I got to buy this many extra hours in order to do that because I know that we are 70%, right? So you manage it as a team, and that will help you be profitable on every project going forward. It'll also let you know the overall profitability of working this ticket and that ticket. You'll know which client is profitable and which is not, which is more profitable, which is less profitable, right? You can learn a massive amount about your company if you put time into every ticket. The time is accurate. The time is updated every time you touch that ticket. And you look at the entire backlog. And once you know the backlog, you know how time moves into and out of your system. You know your burn rate. You know how long it takes you to do 1,000 hours. Right now, everybody on this call could put your backlog into the chat and it would be meaningless. I can't compare them. There is no industry standard. For one of you, your normal backlog is 3 hours. For somebody else, your normal backlog is 100. And for somebody else, it's 1,000. This is a very personalized thing based on how your system works, not on how somebody somewhere who wants to buy up 12 MSPs in the next 6 months thinks your backlog should look, right? Don't let other people decide what your goals are. Finally, this is the hardest one to measure. Go back. Why does your business exist? And what matters? And then when you think about a measure, you say, okay, I want to put in this measure. And my goal was to continue to make sure that we're profitable at this level, increase profit about 10% a year, maintain the culture, keep our clients happy. How does this measurement help me achieve that? And I'm not saying it's not possible, but it is difficult. It takes time. It takes you sitting in a chair with a cup of coffee for 15 minutes every morning, watching the birds wake up and go about their day, and thinking about your business. How does it actually affect what I'm doing? How do I turn this into something that's useful? And if it's not, if you can't draw that line, it's okay to not pay attention to that measurement. You can leave it to the side. You can look at it someday. There's a whole lot of measurements that you should look at once a month or once a quarter, but not every day, not every week. Don't be hounding your employees about it, right? If you want to measure something else, right? Think about, okay, what do I want to measure? And write down a sentence, or two. How is this related to my success and why does it matter, right? If you want to say, okay, what is client retention? That's a great thing to know, right? That's a measure that you can argue matters. It's not something you need a dial on a dashboard on your desktop every day of your life, but once a year, look at client retention. Write out for yourself. What's the process? Like, okay, first of all, I got to know when they started, how long they've been with me. Did they take any breaks? What level are they at? Da-da-da-da-da. I'm going to determine what's normal in that range. What are the exceptions? It's critically important. When you look at any data, you need to know what's the norm and what are the exceptions. That's why I want human being technicians to open up the event logs. I want them to look at the event viewer and know what's normal and what's not. So in a crisis, they're not seeing things for the first time and having to track down, is that normal or is it not? They will know that because every single month they look at the event logs of every single client. They've got a norm figured out, right? Same thing in your business. When you start measuring stuff, first you have to determine the norm, and then you have to determine the exception. For homework, I am not going to tell you all to go get 5 years of graduate level statistics, but it wouldn't hurt. If you want to track things, just remember Goodhart's law. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. Track everything you want, but don't talk to your employees about everything as if it's a target. It's fine. If you want to measure utilization, great. Do not make that part of the employee evaluation. When you think about employee evaluation, listen, this could be a whole nother seminar. You've got a job description, which leads to a job ad, which leads to the criteria for picking candidates, which leads to interview questions, which leads to your quarterly evaluation criteria, right? Is the measure that you have there something that's going to improve that technician's ability to do their job and provide great service? If the answer is no, it is not something you need to talk to the employee about. There's a lot of things in your business where you want these numbers and you should have these numbers, but don't talk to employees as if this is how we measure your job. This is how we measure whether or not you are giving great service. You want to know whether clients are happy? Talk to your clients. You want to know if your technicians are giving good service? Also talk to your clients, right? So, you have to manage employees as part of the system, and are they contributing to the system or are they a detriment to the system? And always, always, always remember, why does your business exist and what is important to you? If you do not know why your business exists, it's usually really, really simple. And you just got to go think about it for a few minutes and write it down. And if it exists so you can make $72,000 a year for the next 12 years so you can retire and have a decent home, great. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. Write it down, share it with people, and literally you can start asking the question of your employees. Hey, as you go about your day, just ask yourself a question. Is this going to help Karl get to retirement? Right? Is this a profitable day for our company? Is what I'm doing helping to contribute to the big picture? Yes or no? So think about your why and share your why with your employees. And with that, I'm going to take another sip of coffee and answer any questions that you have. So I'm going to take some time for those of you who want to think about what you want to ask, but put your questions in the Q&A and I will stay as long as it takes to answer them all. And I'm sorry this went over an hour, but man, this easily could have been a 3-hour presentation. Nothing? You guys are all happy as clams and you got everything you needed? Was this useful? That's what I would like to know. And you can put that in the chat as well. How best to get techs to buy in for KPIs? Well, it depends on the KPI. I would say, good question. The main thing is if you've got an actual KPI, that's something that's useful, that's going to drive your company in the right direction. What I would do, what I always did with standard operating procedures is on Monday morning at the all company meeting, I would introduce it. Like, for example, we're all going to put time in our tickets, right? That's good for me. And so here's why we're going to do it. And here's how you do it. And here is a written SOP if that's useful, right? And then we say, okay, so what questions do you have, right? And then you literally have to spend a week just reminding them. I always talk about it as a never-ending chatter. Like, did you put your time in the ticket? How's the time in the ticket? Is that time accurate? Is that what we talked about? Da 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 da. Right? I always give Starbucks as the example. When you walk into a Starbucks, there's a standard chatter going on. There's a certain kind of music. There's a certain kind of way that the baristas talk to each other. There's a way that they call out orders. None of that is by accident. Starbucks has planned the chatter inside their stores and they fine-tuned it over the years. And you need to have a similar chatter inside of your business, like, hey, did you put your notes in the system? Did you put your time in the system? We got this new thing where we're putting in documented notes at the end of every ticket, and that's assigned to the service manager that you swear like these notes are up to date and the time is right. Okay, great. Client doesn't necessarily know what that means, but that's our process. So you have to educate them, train them, and then constantly remind them. What's funny is, as long as you do it in a very friendly manner, they never see it as nagging. Technicians are like everybody else on earth. They are completely overwhelmed. They have a million things to do. And when you add one thing to that and say, this is important to us, they need to know it's important to us, to the company, not so that you can get your management by objective, MBO, payout of 20% at the end of the quarter. That does not motivate your employees. Luckily, in small business, probably nobody here has an MBO. Nobody has to worry about that, but that may be the environment that your technicians came from. And so when you say, this is good for us, we, the company, need you to put your time in, here's why it matters, right? Literally, this matters because ... I would not put in any measurements that don't matter to the long-term success of your business. And I wouldn't put in anything that you can't explain to a technician in terms of the long-term success of your business. Thank you for that, Star. Other comments or questions in the Q&A? All righty. Well, we are 20 after the hour, 21 after the hour. So if there are no other questions, I will let you go. We'll get up the recording as quick as possible. If you have additional questions, always send me an email, carlp@smallbizthoughts.com. Quick last minute commercial right before we close. If you're not a member of the Small Biz Thoughts technology community, go to smallbizthoughts.org. We would love to have you join us. We have our new interface alive and kicking, and we would love your feedback on that as well. So very good. I'll get the recording up as well as the transcript. And if you need feedback on that handout, send me an email, carlp@smallbizthoughts.com. Thank you all.